and he grabs me by my shirt and like pushes me back in my office. And I said, dude, get your fucking hands off me.
After a tense backstage standoff involving Francis Ngannou and Dana White, the combat sports world froze as things escalated far beyond what anyone expected. But Ngannou wasn't done, not even close. Moments later, he fired back with a verbal strike that stunned everyone watching. And what unfolded afterward left fans genuinely shaken. Let's break down exactly what went down. The allegations that blew everything open in MMA, a sport filled with rivalries inside and outside the cage. Few clashes have drawn as much attention as the ongoing battle between UFC CEO Dana White and former heavyweight king Francis Ngannou. What once looked like a simple disagreement over contracts has transformed into something much bigger, something personal, dramatic, and far more explosive than anyone predicted. That end mid-November 2025. Dana White appeared on the popular Flagrant podcast with comedian Andrew Schultz. But what he said during that interview sent shockwaves through the entire MMA world. This wasn't the usual Dana White trash talk about an ex-UFC fighter. This time, it felt different. White spoke freely, pulled no punches, and seemed completely unbothered by whatever consequences his words might spark. He laid everything out in a way that made fans realize this feud had crossed a line, and it wasn't going back.
Francis Ngannou is a bad guy. He's not a good guy. He plays the whole, I don't understand the language, and he tries to come off like he's a nice guy, you know what I mean? And people go, oh, it's the language barrier probably. No, there's no language barrier with this guy. He's a bad guy.
Now, before we go any deeper, you need the full picture, because this situation isn't just one moment or one comment. This feud has history. It has layers. And to understand the weight of what Dana White revealed, you have to understand the build-up, the tension, and the long-running friction between these two giants of the sport. According to White's story on the podcast, the first major flashpoint dates all the way back to UFC 220 in January 2018. This was a defining moment in Francis Ngannou's career, a fight for the heavyweight title against the legendary Stipe Miocic. Ngannou was on a meteoric rise, and confidence around him was sky high, maybe too high, at least from Dana's perspective. White claimed that after one of the press conferences, Francis walked up to him in a hallway and made a request that Dana saw as bold, borderline disrespectful. In White's telling, it wasn't just a question. It was the attitude behind it that stuck with him. And according to Dana, this was the moment everything changed. The moment he realized the relationship between him and Ngannou was heading toward a long, complicated, and explosive future.
So after the press conference, we're walking down this hallway and he comes over to me and he grabs me. And he says, let me tell you what's going to happen. His English is fucking great, okay? No language barrier whatsoever. When this fight's over, you're going to book me a private plane to Paris.
Think about that for a second. A fighter on the verge of the biggest moment of his life, stepping into a heavyweight title fight, and before he's even proven he can win, he's demanding a private jet to Paris. Dana White says he actually laughed at first, assuming Ngannou had to be joking. But according to him, Francis wasn't smiling, wasn't exaggerating, and wasn't backing down. He looked Dana straight in the eye and said, "I'm not joking. You're going to book me a private plane to Paris." And this is where the entire story flips. This is where Dana's version of events stops portraying Francis as just a confident challenger and starts painting him as entitled, out of control, and maybe even intimidating behind the scenes. But reality hit hard on fight night. Things did not go the way Francis expected. Stipe Miocic dominated him from the opening bell to the final horn, outclassing him in every round and winning by unanimous decision. It wasn't close. It wasn't competitive. It was a full 5-round lesson, a beatdown that showed the entire world Francis still had a long way to go before he could call himself a champion.
Stipe Miocic beats the fucking shit out of him. Beats the shit out of him. So that ended that whole conversation.
But according to Dana White, that hallway incident wasn't the end of their problems. Not even close. White claims that shortly after the loss, in that same backstage area after the post-fight press conference, Francis grabbed him in a way he describes as aggressive and confrontational. White says that moment was the first time he genuinely considered removing Ngannou from the UFC roster altogether. The only reason he didn't, according to him, was because members of his own team advised him to cool down and rethink the situation. And if that were the only story Dana shared, it would already be explosive. But he didn't stop there. He went further, much further. White detailed a second confrontation, one he describes as even more heated and far more physical. This time, it allegedly happened inside the UFC's own headquarters and involved not just Dana, but another top UFC executive. Based on the timeline and the clues White gave, many believe this took place after Ngannou's brutal 26-second knockout win over Cain Velasquez in early 2019. Here's where things escalate dramatically. White says that during this period, Francis was practically living inside the UFC Performance Institute, using the facilities daily, eating the meals, training full-time, and taking advantage of everything the organization offered its fighters. And then, according to White, Ngannou stormed into his office furious over not receiving a $50,000 performance bonus, one of those discretionary rewards the UFC sometimes hands out after exceptional fights.
He had just fought, and he comes up to my office, and he's in the hallway or whatever, hanging out, and I said, "Come on in, what's going on?" And he was pissed off that he didn't get a $50,000 bonus in his last fight, that he didn't get the bonus of the night. And I said, "Well, Francis, you didn't get it because this..."
Now this is where Dana White's story takes an even more dramatic turn. According to him, as he began explaining why Francis didn't get the bonus, the discussion quickly escalated. Voices rose, tempers flared, and the tension in the room shifted from frustration to something far more volatile.
And, then my guy Hunter, they were talking about something that might even have been the same thing. And when Hunter started to walk away, Francis grabbed him by the back of his collar and pulled him back, said, "We're not done talking yet."
These revelations painted Francis Ngannou not as a frustrated athlete fighting for better treatment, but as someone Dana claimed used his intimidating physical presence, a towering heavyweight shaped by years of survival and brutal labor in Cameroon, to pressure UFC executives. And what made these allegations even more explosive was the timing. Dana has been openly critical of Ngannou ever since he left the UFC in 2023, often dismissing his new ventures in boxing and the PFL as hype. But coming forward with these specific stories now, years after the events supposedly took place, raised a lot of eyebrows. Dana's podcast appearance arrived just weeks after Ngannou shocked the world with a dominant PFL debut, knocking out Renan Ferreira to win the Super Fights Heavyweight Championship. Add to that his massive paydays from fights with Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua, earnings far beyond anything he made in the UFC, and many observers saw Dana's comments as a response to Ngannou's rising independence and financial success outside the UFC system. During the interview, Dana even suggested that Ngannou's new business partners would eventually regret working with him, implying old behavior patterns would somehow resurface. But to understand Francis Ngannou's reply, and to grasp why this feud has grown far beyond a normal promoter versus fighter disagreement, you have to understand the journey that shaped him. Ngannou's response was calm, grounded, and deeply connected to the life he came from. Instead of firing back with insults or escalating the tension, he explained the circumstances he was living through during those years. And to appreciate that, you have to go back to where everything began. Francis Ngannou was born on September 5, 1986, in the remote village of Beatty, Cameroon, a place marked by harsh poverty and relentless struggle. He was the fourth of 5 children, raised by a single mother after his parents separated. Education was inconsistent, often sacrificed for survival. By the age of 10, he was working full days in the local sand mines, brutal, back-breaking labor under scorching heat for barely $1 or $2. A child doing the kind of work that would be considered unimaginable in most parts of the world. But here is the extraordinary part. That same punishing work built the physical strength that later became his signature inside the cage. More importantly, it shaped his belief system. Growing up around exploitation and inequality forged a deep resentment for being undervalued, something that would eventually influence his stance on UFC contracts, fighter pay, and his refusal to accept deals that he felt disrespected his worth. Ngannou's rise from those conditions to global superstardom wasn't just a career arc. It was a transformation powered by resilience, pain, and a lifetime of fighting for dignity.
So at least I will see the trending Paris Tower Affair and all those stuff. It was pretty easy because Francis speak French and I was a French speaking. So asked all day long. Then at some by 4 I get to this gym named Kajin. That's where the first boxing gym that I went to, and I was straight up with them, like, I have no money, I have nothing, but I want to be a world champion. I mean, I was not until like 22 years old that I decided to like let the village and finally go for what I go to the city and find a gym to practice, to start combat sport. And at the time it wasn't easy. People thought I was losing my mind. I'm like, what the hell is that? You should find yourself a job to, and think about like make your own family, because in Africa at 22 years old, basically like from poor family, you should be getting married and having kids.
Dreaming of a better life, Francis Ngannou found inspiration in boxing through videos of Mike Tyson, whom he idolized as a living symbol of rising from nothing to greatness. At just 22 years old, he began training informally in Cameroon, pushing himself as hard as he could despite the lack of proper facilities or coaching. But opportunities were scarce, and the societal pressure around him was immense. The people in his community thought he was chasing an impossible dream, wasting his time, and ignoring the responsible path of getting a stable job and starting a family.
And I'm like, no, I'm doing this. I'm like, who have done it? Like, all over the country, nobody have done it, and they will take example from those people who had opportunity before, and you will look at those people's life. It was scary though, like, so this is how I might end up. Then I'm like, at least I do what I like, so it was all about what I love.
Even Ngannou's own mother, who loved him deeply, admitted she had serious doubts about his chosen path. She told him she would support him, even when it seemed like he was losing his way, as she put it. But Ngannou remained undeterred. He had a vision, a dream, and nothing, not doubt, not fear, not criticism, would stop him. After about a year of training in Cameroon, he fell seriously ill with hepatitis. Every last bit of his meager savings went toward hospital bills, and even that wasn't enough to cover the costs. At that moment, many around him shook their heads and said, "I told you so." To outsiders, it looked like pursuing boxing had been a terrible mistake. But for Ngannou, the setback only strengthened his resolve. He understood that if he truly wanted to succeed as a fighter, he couldn't stay in Cameroon. He had to leave. He had to go to Europe. So in 2013, at just 26 years old, Ngannou made a life-altering, incredibly risky decision to migrate to Europe to chase his combat sports ambitions. And when I say risky, I mean it in the truest sense. This journey was physically and mentally life-threatening at multiple points, testing his determination, courage, and will to survive in ways few could imagine.
I kind of like over time find an itinerary, like, okay, I know a geography, I know how to read a map, and now trying to find a way to go through country and country, because I know that in the north is very close from Europe, and people kind of like trafficking there to go to Europe. Not west side, Ceuta, and northeast there is Melilla, and those two lands, small lands, they are Spain territory. So when you get in that territory, you're in Spain. But the level of security around that territory is insane.